Studying the health risks to crews on the front lines of the North Bay fires. Researchers tomorrow will begin looking at whether firefighters suffered any toxic exposure in an effort to try to better protect crews from harmful contaminants. Now, the San Francisco Firefighters Cancer Prevention Foundation is backing this study. And Tony Stefani, you actually founded that group. You're here with me now. Thank you for being here. You're a retired fire captain, put in, what, more than 20 years there in San Francisco, and you're also a cancer survivor. Tell me why this study is needed, why it's so important.
Well, it's important. It's extremely important. About 6 or 7 days into that fire, we had a board of directors meeting. And everybody on our foundation board was extremely concerned about the level of exposures that these firefighters were getting. This was not your basic fire in a forest, wildland fire. This was a fire that spread into the urban interface. In other words, into property, into subdivisions where we lost over 8,000 structures. The level of their exposures was extremely high because they weren't wearing self-contained breathing equipment like you normally would at a structure fire. They weren't prepared for that, and they, when you're in that type of situation, you have to be able to move rapidly in and out, and they're on the fire lines for 24 hours at a time, and they never really escaped the smoke for 6 to 10 days. So these exposures were extremely bad.
Are you already hearing from some of the firefighters that they're feeling bad?
We talked to a couple of the firefighters from San Francisco that were involved. The city sent up approximately 61 firefighters. I believe it was 11 strike teams. And a few of them complained that definitely severe headaches, feeling nauseous, not feeling well, days after they got back after fighting these fires.
Tell me what this study will do. How many people will be involved, and what will be the process?
Basically, we're sort of constrained because there's only so much money that we have to put into this type of study, and this particular study is going to cost our foundation about $100,000, and that's going to look at approximately 200 firefighters. It'll give us an idea of and give us a starting point of the type of chemical exposures they receive, the type of exposures that for instance, like persistent organic pollutants, these chemicals that stay within the body after working fires, especially something this catastrophic, and it'll give us a better idea of what's going on internally. This hasn't been done before, and we felt that to turn the men and women who fought this fire and these fires loose back into the firehouses without any follow-up at all was not a good thing to do.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's definitely something that has to be done.
Well, when you look at the number of homes that burned, and homes these days are filled with all sorts of things, what do you think the firefighters potentially were exposed to?
Hundreds of toxic chemicals, and some of these PPOs, these persistent organic pollutants. Example, flame retardant chemicals, they're polybrominated diphenyl ethers. They're supposed to be there to protect the citizen and give them an opportunity to escape a fire a lot sooner if their couches and homes weren't protected with this. But actually they do nothing. They're extremely toxic, and firefighters are not only exposed to them on the fire ground, in their homes and in their place of work, but when they work in this situation, they're exposed to furans and dioxins that are carcinogenic. And one of the main reasons that the men and women in this profession are getting sick.
And this is something that you've seen within the department. Talk to me about the number of people that have been lost just in the San Francisco Fire Department alone.
In San Francisco, since the early 2000s, we've lost well over 250 firefighters, both active and retired. And that number doesn't take into consideration the number of firefighters that have contracted cancer, have survived, or the ones that are battling it right now. And our foundation's working with 65 firefighters right now, active and retired, that have some form of cancer.
Let's go back to this study. Going to start taking these blood and urine samples from as you mentioned, about 200 firefighters. When do we expect to get some results, and what exactly are you planning to do with the results?
Well, first of all, it starts tomorrow, and it's going to start in the city for Tuesdays and Wednesday. Then I believe it's going to move to the North Bay for a couple of days, and then to the South Bay for a couple of days. These blood samples will be going to the California Department of Human Services and Toxic Substances to be analyzed. Once we get an idea and we look at the various chemicals that were involved in this fire and the stuff that's persistent in their blood, we're hoping that we'll get grants that come along, and we'll be able to follow them for a longitudinal study and to keep an eye on them. Our foundation, the mission statement for our foundation is to prevent, and act in early detection for the men and women as far as finding out what's going on, and this will give us an opportunity to do that.
As you mentioned, unprecedented, especially when you're looking at the magnitude of the North Bay fires and the potential exposure. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and talk with us today. We'll definitely be following up on this study. Ken?